So the discussion is Passover. This is part 2. You can catch part 1 online, but each one of the classes is pretty much its own encapsulated area. So we're going to look at the miracles of Pesach today, because a major part of Pesach was the miracles. Now, last week we actually started to describe and discuss why the Jews had to be slaves in Egypt, right? We picked a few reasons for that. Do you remember what the answers were for that, Ido?
Why we were slaves?
Yeah, that was last week's discussion, which we did for like an hour and a half.
Covered a lot of things.
Okay, so basically what we said was, that's his way of saying,
That's my political.
can't remember. So much rubbish, so much good stuff.
Oh, we started by three points?
That's
Right?
right.
Okay. I don't remember what any of them are.
So we said we have faith in God, build up trust in God,
Right.
and to curb our desire for financial goods. That's one of the reasons why we had to go into slavery. Also, you mentioned in addition to that, that being in Egypt was there to humble us and to build our faith in God. One of the main ways that we build our faith in God were actually the miracles. Up to the Egyptian point of history. Hi, you're in this class? Pesach? Great. Could you pass us? What's your name? Ali? Ali what? Nice to meet you. Take a seat.
Now that everybody knows my name and last name, hi.
Oh, you don't know any of the band here? Right?
I know so that we
You'll get more later. Here we go. So we're discussing how the miracles of Pesach actually were there to help build faith in God. Up to that point, there were no open miracles in Jewish history. Open miracles began at Pesach. There were private miracles, but they weren't public miracles. Okay, and this is actually signified by the name of God that is going to change over here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the miracles of Pesach, what they were like and why they're so important. They play such a major role in our relationship to God. You with us? Great. We're at the top. We had to start source 1. You turned just the right moment, Ali. Thanks for coming. On the 15th day of this month, Chag HaMatzot, it is the holiday of Matzot. Now we're going to discuss Matzot probably more next week. But Matzot is going to be the food of the holiday. It is no coincidence that we eat this cracker bread, which has the same consistency as the box it comes in on Passover. There's something very significant about the food. The food always reflects the day itself. Eating matzah is one of the Torah mitzvot. There are 2 Torah mitzvot we're going to fulfill at the Pesach Seder. One of them is eating matzah. The other is, anybody know? The other Torah mitzvah we do at the Pesach Seder? That's rabbinic. That's one of the mitzvah, but it's a rabbinic mitzvah.
The whole plate of eating all that other stuff.
That, all the other stuff your mother makes you eat. Yes, a rabbinic mitzvah. Removing chametz is before Pesach, but that is a Torah obligation. You're absolutely correct. Removing all chametz, not just bread, cookies, and pastas. Reading the Haggadah is absolutely correct.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. You should actually read the Haggadah. It's actually one of the mitzvahs over there to your children. Questions that you don't have children yet. We'll discuss that in the coming weeks. Anyway, Chag HaMatzot is called Chag HaMatzot. It's called a number of things, but one of them is the holiday of the Matzot. And it says, Shivat Yomim, Matzot Cheli. For 7 days you shall eat Matzot. V'yom HaRishon, Mikra Kodesh Yelachem. And the first day is going to be a holy day for you. Okay, now we live outside of Israel, so we have 2, but one is actually the Torah obligation, the second is rabbinic. Kol melechat avodah tasu. You cannot do any malacha. You cannot do any work on this day. We're giving it, in that level of refrain from malacha, we're going to give it the same status as Shabbat. However, we're going to see the Jewish holidays, you are allowed to make food, because the Torah itself says you can do ochel nefesh, that you cannot do food preparation, cooking and the like. You cannot do on Shabbat or Yom Kippur. But the Jewish holidays you can. But besides that, we have all the same laws as Jewish holidays, as Shabbat. And in the olden days, when we had a temple, they used to bring sacrifices on these 7 days as well. But Yom HaShvi, but you know, this first day is holy, but also the 7th day is holy. Mikra Kodesh is also a holy day. Kol melech avodah tasu. Don't do any holiday then. So we have this bookends of the holiday, day 1 and day 7. Okay? And then you have the days in between, which are still a little bit holy, but they're also weekday. What do we call those holidays, by the way? Chol HaMoed. What does chol mean? Weekday. That's right. Actually, the word chol, I'm very into Hebrew words, they reveal a lot to us, actually means sand. Chet Vav Lamed means sand. Why would weekdays be called sand? Why would they have the same word? Because what is sand? Sand are individual granules that are not connected, but when they come together, they form a mass. They form a whole grouping. but they don't have an independent identity, unlike Shabbat that does. Moed. What does the word moed mean? A very important Hebrew word you're going to hear many times when it comes to Jewish holidays and the temple in Jerusalem. Ohel Moed, you ever heard of that before? The Ohel Moed? Moed actually means a place of meeting. So the Ohel Moed is a tent of meeting because that's where we, the Jewish people, met God. That's where God's presence was most felt out. The Jewish holidays are called the Moadim in plural, Moed in singular, because we meet God and the time meets us on those days. Okay? You meet time at certain points of the year. So Chol Moed means holiday, but it's also Chol, so it's a mix. Yes.
Why is the first day? Why is the first 2 days holidays? I mean,
First day is holiday, right. Oh, so we're going to see what happened at that event that Hashem has said this has become a holy day for you. The whole redemption from Egypt made this into a holy day. Did we discuss days last time you were here, Jacob? Do you remember? How the days work? How the holiday works? The time, Zman works?
Do you mean in terms of like the monthly,
Yes?
like annual week month? In that regard?
That we mentioned, that we did mention, no, but actually how time works in general.
This is
Yes. Did you mention that last class?
we mentioned that. We didn't like go into depth.
Okay, I want to mention that a little bit later. That's going to be very important over here, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about the main miracles that happens. The main miracles that happens, a number of them. Number one were the 10 plagues. Okay? That was one of the main ones. Number two is going to be Shabbat HaGadol. Right, the great Shabbat, which we also still celebrate. Have you heard of Shabbat HaGadol? Yeah? Okay. I was actually asked this when I went into LL Security on one of the JC trips, of which I've done probably like 25 at this point. And the Israeli service guy looks at me and he says to me, "When is Shabbat HaGadol?"
Really?
Yeah. Because they want to test you to see if you're,
Answer.
they see my face, they see my last name Hajioff, they think, terrorist, So I said, "I know it. Do you know when it is?" So we had the whole discussion. We'll discuss that later on.
You discussed it in Hebrew.
In Hebrew with them, yeah. They're not there to test you. If you get it wrong, they don't let you on the plane. They're there to see how you answer questions, if you freak out. I have a very guilty conscience, so immediately I move into, hostage mode as soon as I... Okay. So let's discuss these 10 plagues. Okay? Says the Maharal of Prague, Tamid hamakashim elamali yoter kashe. Each plague would increase in severity. Okay? Vein lavi maka kashe v'achakash ina kashe kolchach. Wasn't that each plague deteriorated? Each one got more and more difficult, and therefore each plague got from the least to the most. So the miracles that happened, we see from the Maharal, weren't just there to make miracles, they were there to make a point and to put pressure on the Egyptians and to Pharaoh. What was the pressure that were being put on? To let the Jewish people go. The miracles came with a purpose. They didn't just happen. We needed the miracles in order to put pressure onto Pharaoh and the Egyptians to let the Jewish people go. Had they stopped at a certain point, actually up to a certain point, they would have let us, the plagues would have stopped. Okay? So they were there for a number of reasons. Reason number one is to show God's greatness to the Jewish people and the rest of the world, because they were famous and still are famous, these plagues. But in addition, they came to put pressure onto the Egyptians themselves. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to divide the plagues. We're going to do it, we'll do it first of all inside the Malbim, then we'll see it in the chart, which I mapped out for you. Okay? The plagues came, there were 10 plagues. We're going to discuss them in a little bit of detail. They actually came in 4 groupings. We're going to divide them up into 4 groupings. 3, 3, 3, and 1. Okay? The first 3 had a function. The second 3 had a different function. The third 3 had a different function. The last one had a function that actually culminated all the 9 previous ones. Okay? So a major part of Pesach is actually understanding these plagues. Says the Malbim, one of the commentators from the 1800s, I believe, he says the first 3 plagues were blood, frogs, and lice. I said a Rishon Ba, Levarer, what do they come? They came to demonstrate the reality and the existence of God. They were a training session. Why would this be? This was due to the fact that Pharaoh denied God's existence when he said, "Who is God?" that I should listen to his voice. So this is very unusual, because in Egypt they had a lot of gods. They had a whole bunch. They collected them, right? Like we collect, I don't know, what do people collect nowadays? Coins, right? They collected them. Actually, when Moses came to see Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, "Who are you here to represent?" "I'm here to represent my God." Who's that? The God of Yud with a Hey, with a Vav, with a Hey. I think, right? We don't even say it, it's so holy. Pharaoh says to him, never heard of him, bring my book of God. And he brought him a big, thick book, right? Like a yellow pages. They still have yellow pages? A Google document. And they went through, and he's like, he's not here. And the question is, why don't you just like add the name? Okay, fine. He's not here, we'll just add him to the list. That would work, wouldn't it? We'll go to Y, go to Yud with a Hey, with a Vav, Hey, next. There's obviously something very different about this God. See, the gods they had up to that point were very different. The gods they had, they were fearful, right? They were fearful of. You had the god of the Nile. You had the god of the fish, right? The fish god, Dagon. You had the sun god, Ra. Stuff they needed, the stuff you needed. But that a God who controlled the universe and was a God of mercy, they had never experienced before. This is a completely new concept to Pharaoh and to Egypt. Okay? Now we're used to it, right? The God of love, we understand that. But up to this point, it didn't exist. So the first three. Now, what do you see as a commonality in the first three? Blood, frogs, and lice. They all come from the ground, right? The blood was the rivers, the water. The frogs came out of the water, right? And the lice were started as on the ground itself, in the sand itself. That's how they started off. So God was saying, I control everything that's on the earth, right? Everything that's on the earth. The second set, which are wild animals, epidemic and boils, demonstrated Vaseda Zeh Sheni Shel Adash Balavarer Penashgacha, another form of God's control. You see, Pharaoh didn't believe that this God you have, maybe he created the world and has control of the earth, but does he have control of the things that are on the earth? Said Pharaoh. So Moses says, God says, yes. And the second set comes, you see that? These are creatures, wild animals, boils, affected humans, right? The epidemic killed all the animals, and the wild animals attacked the people. So he's saying, not only am I controlled in the physical earth itself, I also have control over that which is on the earth as well. Okay? Turn over the page. So how about the third set? So the third set, Moses informed him, third one, were they? Hail, locusts, and darkness. And they were to demonstrate that God had absolute power over the heavens, that which comes out, because the hail came out of the sky, the locusts traveling from other countries out of the sky, and darkness comes from the sky as well. The universe itself was dark for them. So God is saying, I'm in control of the earth, but I'm in control of everyone on the earth. And I'm also in control of everything in the spiritual and the heavens as well, the physical realms as well. That third set was also there to prove to Pharaoh, who himself doubted that you could have a God who made the world, but maybe that's it. Maybe there's a God who affects various individuals, but that's it. But that a God does this, that, and controls the physical universe as well. So it came. So basically we're saying these 10 plagues were a training course. They were a university that lasted for, I don't even know how long they all lasted for. Almost a year.
What?
Yeah.
All of them?
Yeah. In totality, a little less. We'll see in a second. Because many of them came with 3 weeks of warning, and then 1 week of plague. They were removed. What was the final plague? Killing of the firstborn. That showed the ultimate proof that God controls life and death. Life and death is in the hand of God, and that's most severe. And for Pharaoh, it was very severe because he was a firstborn. So that really impacted him. Okay? Now these ideas are, well, that's obvious. It was learnt over here. The creation of the Jewish people, which is really what we're discussing over here, this is what was learnt and understood from all the plagues that were happening. So let me just give you a little sheet of a summary you can have, and you can use your Pesach Seders as well. You can hand that out to the people there as well. Thank you. Thank you, wonderful. And this is for...
Oh, sure.
You're going to share. So sorry, you can have it at the end. Okay, so let's divide them up. So we have the Dam Sefadei Kinim. By the way, Moses had a staff. On the staff itself were etched the first letters of each one of these plagues. And he was referred to them as 3, 3, 3, and then 1 by an acronym. Something about each one of them as a grouping that had tremendous power. So the first set of the nine, first set the 3 demonstrated the existence of God in response to Pharaoh's denial of God. That's the Malbim. They came from below, from the water, from the earth, being the lesser form of plague. right? They were actually performed by Aaron. Does anyone know why Aaron performed the first 3 plagues? Difficult question.
I think it's because it came from the water, like the water saved him.
Right, the water saved him, and the frogs came out of the water, and the lice, well, they didn't save him, but the earth saved him when he killed the Egyptian and buried him in the earth. So in order to show gratitude, even to inanimate objects, a whole different discussion not for now, but we show gratitude and we imbue wholeness into inanimate objects. We learn it out from here. This is one of the proof texts for it. Right? He didn't want to strike the Nile that saved his life, and it was a baby put in by his sister inside by his mother inside the ark. Remember, inside the little teva, right? So we have gratitude to inanimate objects. Anyone know where else in Judaism we see thought for inanimate objects? Almost the emotions of an inanimate object. That's in the Torah itself, like in Jewish life today. You know, we cover over the challah on Shabbat. We make kiddush. Why do we do that? Number of reasons. So one is because we don't embarrass the challah. Challah is not embarrassed. It's not about the challah, it's about us. Because really you should make the blessing on the bread first, then the wine. But you have to make kiddush first. So we cover over the challah so it's not there in order not to see us making the blessing over the wine first. It's an inanimate object. Right? Challah does not blush. It's not about the challah, it's about us. Same kind of idea. Okay, so these first sets, actually Aaron himself was the one who created them. And God's power over water, aquatic creatures, and dust of the earth. Some say it was frogs, some say it was actually little crocodiles. It makes that plague a lot more interesting because we saw the frogs went everywhere. Inside houses, inside ovens, and even inside people.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. And they came with, the first 2 came with warning. That was 3 weeks of warning, then 1 week of plague. That means they said, it's coming. If you don't let the Jewish people go, you're going to get this plague. I'm warning you, it's coming. No. Okay? No warning. 3 plagues about which the Pharaoh was not warned to cause pain and inconvenience, but no threat to life, says the Rambam. Second grouping, Ur of Dever Shchin, right? That showed God's control over things that are on the earth, right? And they came from above the ground and from the air, being a higher form of plague. And they were performed by Moses. And they showed God's control over land animals, life of land animals, and humans, because the humans got the boils. Once again, warning, no warning. Finally, the last 3 grouping: hail, barad, arba, locust, and darkness. Okay, that shows God control that is absolute and unparalleled, and they came from the sky. Okay, it shows God power over nature, flying creatures, and day and night. Finally, the last one, Makat Bechorot, which shows control over death. Of these, which one would you say is the worst? So you would have thought death of the firstborn because it comes last. Some,
It's concrete. You suffer a little bit through the rest, right? But
the other ones you.
The other one is
And by the way, you would say, well, maybe not everyone was affected by this. The answer is every single house was affected, and sometimes more than once. You could have more than 2 firstborns in one house. How's that possible? You used to think, right? Because you have one lady that had firstborn children from 4 different men, which was common in Goshen. Goshen was the capital of Egypt, one of the main cities at least, and so the Jews were residing. And they say Egypt was the most licentious place in the world. Good word that, but not a good thing either. And Goshen was the most licentious of the cities there. And that's where the Jews were. And the Jews were intermingled. Because remember, by Makat Bechorot, God passed over the houses of the Jews in order to kill the firstborn children. Right? That means the Jews were intermingled with these people. Okay. All right. So that's the map of how it came out. Another miracle that happened to the people. And that is called what we now celebrate as Shabbat HaGadol. So if you get asked by an LL security member when Shabbat HaGadol is, the answer is? The what? What did you say? Shabbat before Passover. Okay, that's not when it actually occurred. Okay, it occurred 3 days before. The Shabbat before Passover may be 3 days before, it may not be 3 days before. But we always celebrate we always celebrate the Shabbat before Passover. Why is it called Shabbat HaGadol? We don't really do too much on the day itself. Besides, you get long lectures in synagogues from the rabbis to go through all the because there's so many laws. They use it as a day to have it's called the Shabbos HaGadol Drasha. The rabbi gives a long lecture about the laws of Pesach or ideas about Pesach. There's so much going on. What actually happened at this time? Vatam, Lefishanase, Bo Nes Gadol. There was actually a great miracle that most people are not aware of that also happened in Egypt. Pesach Misraim. Mikhu Ba'oser, Ba'asok Dichtiv happened on the 10th, right? Ba'asol Chodesh Hazeh, because on the 10th of the month of Nisan, which is 5 days before they left Egypt, it says, "V'yiku lachem seh lebayis avos selabais." Each house had to take for themselves a sheep. So every house, not every person, every house, every family took a sheep, and they brought it to the house and they tied it to the leg of the bed. Why the bed? Because the bed pretty much was the only real furniture we used to have in the houses anyway. Right, if you go back. This was a very dangerous thing to do. Why? That is correct. The sheep was one of the gods because they needed the sheep. Remember, they worshipped things they needed. Right? There was a fear thing. I need the sheep. I'm going to worship the sheep. It has to be appeased. They worshipped the sheep. What did they do with the sheep, the Jewish people? What did they do with it? They killed it after 3 days. They took the blood and they sprinkled it on the mezuzot. One of the early references to the mezuzah being mentioned in the Torah, right, as a place where something happens on, although it's not how we do the mezuzah nowadays, but that's how it was then. It was sprinkled, this blood. That was a sign he had a Jewish house, so God skipped over the house in the merit of this. Okay. Then they took that sheep, they cooked it whole. They didn't make shish kebab out of it. It was cooked as one whole mass, so that it was recognizable. And then they had a meal, and they ate it. They roasted it whole, and they ate it. And they could take the bones and break the bones to suck out the marrow, which many people used to do, and maybe still do, because then you can't recognize the bones. It had to remain shalem whole. Why is this? So the Egyptians could see them eat their god. We had God kebab. Delicious. Yes.
How did they get the sheep? I mean, like, they were like slaves.
So, very good. At this point, they were no longer slaves. The plagues had so much destroyed the Egyptians that at this point they were free. From the beginning of the plagues, the servitude per se had actually stopped. They weren't able to control the Jewish people anymore. The Jewish people were free at that point. And by the way, interesting enough, the Jews, many Jews before this, were shepherds. You see, the Jews, when they arrived in Egypt especially, they were shepherds.
If they were already free, then why did God continue with the plague?
Because they weren't allowed to go. The servitude stopped, but they were still prevented from leaving Egypt.
What's the significance? Why did they eat the sheep?
They ate their God. And that's what we call the Korban Pesach.
So to show the conquered are now conquering.
Right. And they ate it. And what was miraculous?
Were they instructed to?
Yes, that's exactly what we just read. That was the pasuk. Kedichted ba'asol by God. Ba'ersol is Shemot, Exodus chapter 12, verse 3. I'd read it for you. L'chodesh hazeh v'yikchu lachem sela bais avos sel lavayis.
They hadn't received the Torah yet, right?
No, this is way before the Torah. I'll talk about the Torah in a few minutes. This is way before the Torah.
But so God was still talking to the Jewish.
Oh yes, Moses was a prophet. He was a prophet in Egypt. Aaron was a prophet. Miriam was a prophetess. Oh, yes. Right, absolutely. Avram was a prophet, and so was Sarah. This is way before.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
So they were conveying.
Yeah. Pesach she'etzu Mitzrayim hayach biyom chamishi. Right, left on Thursday. Nimsa she'asar l'chodesh hayach Shabbat. So the original Shabbat where this happened, what miracle? They weren't attacked for taking the sheep. Because the Egyptians wanted to attack them. For some reason, we're not told exactly how, I've seen it, they weren't actually attacked for doing it. They weren't able to attack the Jews for taking their God, apparently to kill it and eat it. And that miracle that they were free and able to do this itself warrants mention, and that's Shabbat HaGadol. So the original miracle happened on Shabbat, so to this day, we celebrate Shabbat. Oh, it's not exactly the same date that it happened, but we celebrate it on the same day, the Shabbat before Pesach. Okay? And it says, so everyone took the house, so they tied it to the legs of the bed. The Egyptians said, Why are you taking sheep into your houses? V'hishivum b'shachto. L'shem Pesach. We're going to kill it as a sacrificial paschal offering to God. And they ate. They were furious. They were furious, Egyptians. This caused a big commotion in Egypt. They were killing their gods. But they weren't able somehow to say anything. Also, because of this miracle, it's called Shabbat HaGadol, to actually commemorate this miracle that happened to the Jewish people. Okay? Questions, thoughts, comments?
That was like a little aggressive.
Yeah, we live in a world today where it seems a little aggressive, right? We want to be nice on enemies. If you saw what the Egyptians did to us beforehand, aggressive would not come to your mind. They deserved a lot worse of years of killing, murder, and torture, which God did not tell them to do. To take their God and to eat it was not considered aggressive.
But it's like,
It was a very important point from God.
no, I get that. But I almost feel like they're already like pissed off and like they let us off.
No, they didn't let us off. They still wanted to massacre us, and they actually come chasing for us a little bit later. Let's not forget that.
We weren't like slaves anymore.
No, we are not slaves anymore.
And so it's like you're like poking at the ball. You know what I'm saying? Like if you poke at the ball, the
We
ball
weren't poking
comes
them.
after you.
We were making a point about gods. The one true God. That's what the Jewish people are. And always have been. What did Abraham do his entire life? Abraham spent his entire life telling people, don't kill your children. People are like, you're crazy. That's what we do. People are still doing it. Still blowing up their kids in the name of God. And we're like, no, that's not right. Jews are always there to make a point. It's not right. This is not what we do. This sheep is not your God. They take it, it becomes part of us. We dominate it. It doesn't dominate us. Right?
Why don't we do that today?
We do it today.
We do.
Oh,
The sheep,
we did it for many, many years after. So nowadays it happens, if it were to happen, it is not, no. We would do it. Still eat meat. But you cannot do it for two reasons. One, it has to happen in Jerusalem. And two, you need to have a certain amount of purity in order to bring it as a sacrifice. Okay? So we can't do it for those reasons. It's questionable, by the way. Many Jews moved to Israel and moved actually to Sfat, so they wouldn't possibly have to bring it as a sacrifice even today, but we don't do it. Instead, we have a memory of this miracle on the Seder plate, is the shank bone, the zeroah. So we're going to have it over there as a memory. We don't point and say this is the Korban Pesach. Actually, you shouldn't even have roasted meat without some sauce on it on Pesach because it's so close to the Korban Pesach. This was the main mitzvah of the day, to have this meal together.
So we have the shank bone also during the Seder, but is there...
We don't eat it. We just it's there.
But is there a Shabbat, like, is there anything that we should do during Shabbat to commemorate as well?
To commemorate what?
To commemorate this during Shabbat?
No, not really. This miracle, we don't actually do it. No. We don't. There's no mitzvah that's attached to Shabbat HaGadol. It's just the Shabbat before, it's remembered. There's no mitzvah per se that's done to commemorate it. Most miracles that happen for us in Jewish history, we don't have mitzvah to commemorate. Or we'd literally be the entire year doing stuff. I'm even splitting of the Red Sea, right, which falls down the 7th day of Pesach. We don't do anything per se to commemorate that either. That's a big miracle. It coincides with the Pesach, but that's not the reason for it. You don't do anything, you don't like start running through water.
Right. Yeah.
Although we discuss actually minhagim at the Pesach Seder, some people do stuff with water. Moroccans will jump over water, will have water pass over their heads, they'll do certain stuff to remember all this stuff. Syrians, yeah. We'll discuss that, we're going to do a whole thing just on the different minhagim at the Seder in 2 classes time. Okay. So before we get to the next I want to discuss with you, I want to talk to you a little bit about time and how time works, just to appreciate why this miracle part is very important. So one aspect is we see God's control of all of creation, all of nature, and that was a big change. By the way, you have to understand, up to this point this didn't exist. It started at Pesach. Pesach is when the whole thing began. The Jewish people began with miracles. It's very important. God went in and took us out of Egypt. It wasn't an angel, aniva lo malach, aniva lo saraf. Meet there, God took us out. It's a very important feature of the Pesach story. And but as well as that, I want to talk to you a little bit about time for just a few minutes of time. Okay? Most of us depict time as a timeline. Did we do this last week? I don't remember. I think so. We look at time as a timeline. The Hebrew word for time is zman. Very good. The word zman actually means something else. Zim. What's a zimun?
Tune. No.
It's a zemer. Yeah. No, zimun is actually to prepare something. You prepare. Like before you bench, you make a zimun. You're preparing people to actually go and say Birkat HaMazon. So the word zman actually means to prepare. Because time is prepared for us. Let me share with you something unusual. We'll discuss this again when we get to the idea of matzah. We know that Abraham was visited by 3 angels. Those angels came to him and he fed them. And he gave them meat, and he gave them wonderful foods, and he beautiful cattle and delicious meal. But he also gave them ugot. What are ugot? Modern Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew actually means matzah. And actually you know that because when the Jewish people left, they left with ugot on their backs. And that's the matzah. Why? Rashi tells us it was Pesach. I mean Pesach. Pesach, the Jewish people hadn't even got into Egypt yet. How could it be Pesach time? Okay. So we just go through this and we'll get through this. So the answer to that question is that Pesach isn't just an event, it's a time. It's a time of the year. That time of the year has always existed. It's always been part of the fabric of time. See, the non-Jewish calendar follows a timeline where there's a beginning and then you get to the end. But there's no relationship between July 4th, 2016 and July 4th, 1776. Or whatever the original one was. There's no relationship, just choose a date. Right? Thanksgiving, we just chose a date. Right? FDR, Abraham Lincoln chose a date, and then FDR moved it around a little bit, whatever he did, and he chose the 4th Thursday in November. Any relationship between the original Thanksgiving and the 4th Thursday in November? No relationship. It's too random. We just chose a date. Could they have chosen mid-February? Yeah, but they don't coincide with Valentine's Day. I don't know. Judaism sees things completely differently. Where you are in the year, this is a very important idea. Where you are in the year is very important. The actual year itself is not so important, interestingly enough. But where you are in the year is important. And that is, Rabbi Dessler, one of the great rabbis, says something very interesting. He says, as you travel through the year, you get to various stations. Various stops. You're like on a train. Imagine you're on a train and you're traveling through the year and it goes round, right? And you get to a place called Pesach. That's where the year begins. Because Pesach's going to be the beginning of the months. We're going to count the months from Passover. And then you get to the next month, right? Although that's not when the world was created. It was created in Tishrei. The Jewish people were created in Nisan. So we actually count the months from Nisan. And that's actually the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people whilst in Egypt. They had to set up a calendar. The first mitzvah given to the entire Jewish people is a Chodesh Zelachem. Create for yourself a calendar. Okay, that's what Torah tells us. Why? Because you've got to know where you are in the year. It's very, very important. Which is why we mentioned last week that Pesach has to appear in the springtime. Right? Which is why this year is a Shana Muberet. The month has to be pushed off because otherwise the holidays travel backwards through the year. Because the solar calendar, the lunar calendar, off by 11 days. Anyway, so as we get to each holiday, there's a certain power, a certain energy that's given to us. What is the power of Pesach? Freedom. Zman Charoteinu. That means there's something about the time itself that represents freedom. And it always was that way because God created time at the beginning of time, when He created the world. Which means that we don't celebrate Passover to remember the Exodus of Egypt. It's the other way around. The Jewish people left Egypt because it was Passover. We mentioned this last week. I do remember this. It's based upon this idea. You see that? You got that? You got that? You with it? What's this guy talking about? Scott's weird accent. I don't know what he's talking about. I'll say it again. Every time in year is like a place. Imagine you go to a place. Imagine it's January 1st and we go to Times Square. And then we go back the next year. Do you see your previous self? No, but you're in the same place. Nachon? True, right? Because you visited a place, it's the location. I can actually leave something one year and you'll pick up the next year. Same thing. Time is like a place. You get to a place, the place has a certain power. It's a positive power. It's called Passover, freedom time. You get to a place called Tisha B'Av. It's a bad time. Which is why so many bad things have happened to our people on Tisha B'Av. You get to a place called Rosh Hashanah. What's that? New beginnings. Rosh Hashanah, the new year. That means the energy. I'm not just like remembering the original Rosh Hashanah when God created the world, or mankind actually. Right? I'm saying I've reached a place which is creation of mankind. Why is that important? That means I'm in the time itself. I've gone back to the original creation. That's the time's like a place. I've gone back to the original location. which means I can get new beginnings. Yom Kippur, right? 10 days later, right? The original kapara. There's something called kapara at that time, atonement. You can atone any time, but that time is exclusively made for it. The world was created with that in mind. So as you get to the time itself, you get the energy. So when you get to Passover, you go free. It's a time of miracles. Not miracles happened all those years ago. That's how we got to plug it into today's class. It's just that is the time of miracles. It's miracle time. It happened to them, happens to you. Why didn't you see your previous self from the year before? Because it's not a circle time, it's a spiral. It's 1 year forward. Which is why the Hebrew word for a year is a shana, shin, nun, hey. What does the word shana actually mean?
Change.
To change, shinoi, very good, and also to repeat. Because the year repeats itself. It's the same thing, you just got the same pattern again and again and again. So Abraham was able to eat matzah on Pesach, although the Jews hadn't left Egypt yet, because it was Zman Cherutin, the time of our freedom. Which is why we say, Bayem Mahem, Zman is there. Those are the days where it happened, but this is the Zman. So you aren't commemorating Pesach, commemorating the miracles, you are to some degree, you're reliving them. Pesach is the greatest example of redemption. Which means the Jewish people had to leave on the 50th of Nisan because that's freedom time. Could they have left a year earlier? They weren't ready or prepared. A year later, it would have been too late. They would have completely assimilated. That was the perfect year, the Jewish year, 2448. The only Jewish year you have to memorize. 2448. That was the year the Jewish people left Egypt and received the Torah. And then 40 years later, in 2488, they entered into Israel. Is the idea clear to you? So when we sit at the Pesach Seder, we don't just talk about the miracles. We are surrounded by miracles. The miracles are there. They're happening again. It's a miraculous time. Leil Shemurim, a time of protection. Which is why, according to many opinions, Mashiach is going to come around Pesach time. He must do, because that's redemption time. It's called Leil Shemurim, the night of protection. Right? Hashem was shomer to the Jewish people. And so you can leave your front door open on Pesach night. Not all parts of New York. I don't know. Okay. Are we clear on this? So it's not just past events, it's a reliving of those original events as well. Alright. So let's go through the miracles we looked at. We looked at the 10 plagues, the brief synopsis. Shabbat HaGadol, brief synopsis, right? Then the Jewish people left. We know the Egyptians followed us. 7 days later, we're at the Yam Suf, the Reed Sea, or the Red Sea, actually, is the correct way you could refer to it. And we were there, and then we went through the sea. By the way, they went through the sea, not directly across. We went in a semicircle. Are you aware of that? May I borrow your pen? We didn't go to cross the sea. We went to wipe out the Egyptians. We were trapped, and actually, we actually went in 12 channels, one for each tribe, went out one side, and actually came out the other side. Actually, you can see the original. That was how the original splitting of the sea happened. We know the locations. Anton Feldman. So walk through like that. That's why we came to chase us, which explains actually, they weren't sure when the Jews left out, the Egyptians were buried and got killed. Got out to spit the Egyptian bodies out onto the shore. Why? Well, if they were there, we would have seen them. If it was straight, we would have seen them through the split. And the answer is because they were there and we were over here, we couldn't see because they were on the other side of the curve. You couldn't see them as they were actually going through. But that's the original design. Semicircular design of the original crossing of the sea. That's that mapped out. Okay. Alright, so that was the great miracle that happened. Actually, there were 50 miracles that we actually read in that happened at the Yam. It wasn't just the splitting of the sea, there were very miracles that the earth itself became dry, they had fresh water to drink, there were fruits, the Midrash says, many great miracles that happened to the Jewish people at that time. I just want to point out that Jewish history has been rich with miracles for a long time. Look through the scriptures, we'll see miracles happening left, right, and center. Tons of them. A couple of notes about miracles, since we're on the topic itself. Number one, miracles never happen out of nowhere. They always have to have some substance beforehand. Every plague that came always had a little physicality. It wasn't like something came out of the sky and attacked them. No, it just dropped dead. There's always something that came with it. For example, in order to make the sea, he had to put his hand over the water, right? To make this dust go everywhere, to make dust go everywhere for the darkness. And every plague had to have a physical action. This is true right through Jewish history. Right? They couldn't just have the oil burn for 8 nights for Hanukkah, which is going to be the last public miracle for the Jewish people. That's going to be the end. We're starting at place to end. That's why Hanukkah is such a big miracle for us. There are many miracles in between. But Hanukkah was the last time overt miracles happened to the Jewish people. It's closed down. The spiritual world closed down at that point. After that point, we were full of them. Left,
I was
right,
going to
center.
ask if they were so prevalent before, why now there's nothing?
Which means so that's the next question. So why do they stop? Why do they stop the miracles?
If you're saying that they were so prevalent.
They were prevalent. They were prevalent. Open miracles. They always were based on something physical. That's one point, right? We know that Elisha, right, the wine, the oil rather. Some lady who was short of oil in Tanakh, and she had a little bit. And he said, "You know what? Take a bit of oil and then fill up your pots, and they'll fill up." And they all filled up with oil. Right, but she had to have a little oil for it to begin with. There's always there has to be some physical. Before the sea split, there had to be a wind that came all night blowing strong. You have to leave some room for doubters. It's split because the wind. If it's not, you have no free will. There's always a little rational explanation for every miracle in all of scriptures. You can always say, so what happened? Something happened that way. The wind came, and it split the sea, and blood occurs, right, when you infect it with it. Otherwise, we have no free will. The Egyptians had to have a certain room for their free will to be affected. Does that make sense to you?
That's why miracles ended?
No. That's the reason why every miracle has to have a little bit of physicality in this world. Why do they end? Or begin with some physical or rational explanation. Why do the miracles end? So that's less to do with God than it is to do with us. In order to have miracles occur, we have to be at a certain level to appreciate them. We have to be able to appreciate the miracles. In other words, and you have to have the ability to make the miracles happen. It has to be in a person's merit. Miracle happens. There was a great miracle worker, the Talmud speaks about, Hanina ben Dosa was his name. A great miracle worker. And the story is told in the Talmud that they sent him on missions with Jewish people. He was a very elderly, holy Jew, but miracles happened for him. One night, Erev Shabbat, his daughter comes to him and starts crying. What's wrong? She says, I wanted to buy oil for the Shabbat candles. Instead of buying oil, I bought vinegar. We're in big trouble. Hanina ben Dosa says to her, what's the big deal? She's like, Abba, instead of buying oil, I bought vinegar. Vinegar is not combustible, correct? Oil is. He's like, light the vinegar. He's like, no, but it's not going to light, and there's no oil, we're not going to light Shabbat candles. And he said something very profound. He said, the same God who says that oil burns can make vinegar burn. And she lit the light, and they lasted all of Shabbat. Then Motzei Shabbat, they lit the Havdalah candle off of that candle she lit for the Shabbat candle. Open miracle. Right? Oil burns, vinegar doesn't burn. Vinegar burns. What was he saying? Talmudic times, a couple thousand years ago. After scripture was. The question is, there's many miracles. I mean, your average Tana is resurrecting the dead. The stories of resurrection of the dead are happening. But how come they can do it, we can't do it? And the answer is in what he says. The same God who says this says that. You see, we make a separation. We believe there is the natural, there's the miraculous. The sun goes up, the sun goes down. Why? Because that's what nature says. Nature, Teva described. That's what God. No. Sun goes up because God is putting it there right now. That itself is miraculous. It's all miraculous. There's no non-miraculous. If you see it enough times, it becomes non-miraculous, but that's your own short-sightedness. You're missing out. You're missing the whole point. Hanina ben Dosa was for him. Why does oil burn? Not because oil burns, because God said it burns. Same God who says oil burns can make vinegar burn. Same God. He can if he wants to. For him, the idea of God being involved was so clear, it wasn't even a mystery. As one of my teachers says, he bought an apartment somewhere, a house somewhere, and he found a picture in there. Very weird story there. And it proved that the house he bought was owned by one of his great-grandfathers or something crazy. It's a crazy story. And he found this photo of his ancestor in the remains of this house. And he went to his rabbi and said, Rabbi, look, Imagine this, I found this photo with my great-grandfather in the house I'm about to buy. Can you imagine the coincidence? And I was like, trying to prove to me God exists? Think I don't know that? See, for him, it's like, oh. And for Ram, it's like, yeah, okay. That's the way it works. As soon as you like, you're saying, I see difference between nature and miracle. That's what Tesla says. If it's all miraculous, then you control nature. Imagine you go to a costume party. I'll give you one final example. Just to concretize the idea of miracles, and why don't we have open miracles nowadays? We will again, by the way. We will again when Mashiach comes, so we'll leave that aside for now. If we merit it even there, even that's not a necessity. Let's say you go to a party. What's your name again?
Haley.
Haley. You go to a party, and a person goes up to you and they're wearing a full gorilla costume. And they start to poke you. I'm like, who is that? Like, guess. Is it Edo? Jacob? Is it Anna? What's your name? Anna? Ali. Is it Ali? You're like, who is it? He goes, oh, it's Rabbi Lawrence. You get it right. What do?
Reveal yourself.
I take the mask off. If you get it right, I'm like, you got it right. And I keep poking, like, what are you doing? I know who it is already. Stop poking me. You're annoying me now. So once you know who's behind the mask comes off. Nature is a mask that is put over the world. It is our job to penetrate nature in all its forms and see there is a divine source behind everything. Once you do that, you go and you're able to control nature itself. Nature does not control you.
How do you control nature?
Or go on. Okay, how? You're making a point. Explain yourself.
Well, no, I was just trying to make one comparison. They were like, oh, you find it to be so divine or whatever.
Oh, and we're saying we control it rather than it controls us. Very nice.
I still think it's aggressive.
That's okay. Sometimes in war, you've got to be a little bit aggressive.
Jewish history is aggressive.
Sometimes you'll be a little aggressive.
How do we control nature? We're not.
So that's it. By seeing, actually, the word for nature in Hebrew is teva, right? Teva, not just a sandal or a very successful pharmaceutical company, right? Israeli company here in America. Before it was those, but the word teva, interestingly enough, means something else. You're seeing a certain theme with me already, right? The word teva actually means to sink. Is to sink in. It's sunken in. Why? Because you can get sunk into nature and think this is all there is. You're able to go in there and go, oh, that's all there is. You sink into it. You think this is the reality of the world. But the word teva is also related to another word, which is a matabea, which is one of the older words for a coin. A coin. What's a coin? A coin is an embossed image. That's what makes a coin into a coin. It's an image is embossed onto it, an imprint, or actually a print on it. Not imprint, right? It's on it and stuff. It's kind of, so too, nature is an imprint of the spiritual world. Right? You can see the spiritual world on nature. It's printed on. If you look carefully, you can see it. It's just a print of what's going on. But you've got to be careful because you can also sink into it and lose yourself inside nature as well. I think we've exceeded our time. How long has it been? 48 minutes. It's meant to be a 30-minute class. We're going to stop over there. This last part we'll discuss, God willing, next week, and we'll go further and start discussing the mitzvot of Pesach itself. Actually, before we do that, we've got to talk a little bit next week about questions and answers. Right, why that format is used in the Pesach Seder as opposed to any other format of learning, and why we obsess over children on Pesach unlike any other holiday we have in Judaism. So next week we'll do children and Q&A. Actually, those two are connected. Children in the Passover and the customs we have of giving children treats and hiding things, and Q&A will be next week. Thoughts, comments, questions? Anything discussed about yesterday?
Did we answer what? Oh, sorry.
We mentioned that goats and matzah referring to the same thing, like goats refers
Yes.
to matzah, right? But then, like, I'm always like not skeptical, but I'm like have questions when.
It's okay to be skeptical.
Right. When like,
Cynical's not good. Skeptical's good.
Yeah, two different words.
Slippery
same
slope.
thing.
That's the same word. Mean two different things.
Right. No, like, I guess how do we know that goat and matzah are two separate things? And then why is it just one word used rather than two words?
Why is the word ugot used by the exodus of Egypt? What is it about the word itself? As far as I know, the word uga actually means round. That's actually what the literal translation of the word is, I believe. And that was the original shape. So it's actually referring to the actual food itself. Matzah is referring to a deeper aspect of the food. So the two are synonymous. One is a physical representation of it, and one is what matzah actually represents, which we will see, God willing, as an unleavened food. Right? So one is the physical shape of it. Yeah. That's, I believe, to be the answer to that question. Okay. Og means round.
Agol.
Agol. You can keep it if you want, or give it back to whatever you want.
Yeah, for next week.
Next week or something else.
We're going to be increasing to this, yeah.
Could you answer why the last day is also a holiday?
Partly it's because the miracle happened over there, but we're going to see.
Because the
First and last day, chosen as follows
structure is
itself.
strange.
Right. It takes us right through why you need 7 days of it.
So we don't have other holidays that are bookends.
Sukkot.
Oh, right.
Yeah, Sukkot's the only other one we have Chol Hamoed on.
Yeah,
Okay.